Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.
And greetings and salutations, everyone. You have tuned into Dr. Judy, WTF, and I am your host, Walt Lusk. And back in studio is Dr. Judy Rosenberg. Of course, I'm back in studio too. But thank you so much for tuning in. And those of you, you can now watch us on Facebook. We are live on Facebook as well as ubnradio.com. So if you go to the UBN Radio website, you can watch us live on Facebook.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
that is news to me.
Yes, it's hot off the press, brand spanking new. And we are, of course, part of the iHeartRadio family. And thanks so much for those of you tuned in from the previous show. I know there's a whole plethora of you. We are Dr. Judy WTF, which stands for What the Freud. This is a psychology show with Dr. Judy, who is actually a clinical psychologist and marriage and family child counselor, and founder of the Psychological Healing Center, which can be experienced all over the world. But she has offices in Beverly Hills and Sherman Oaks. The call-in number today is 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. And our show today is a little different by request. It's actually entitled Parents Who Hate Their Children.
And why?
And, of course, how come and why. So if
right.
you feel that you really weren't that liked by your folks, please call in. We'd love to hear from you because you can get on the couch with Dr. Judy with your emotional ouch, and I promise it'll be well worth the call. And we have a very special song we're going to sing. It's like a nursery rhyme, and another special song we're going to get involved with this too.
Well, first of all, welcome back, Walt. Walt, you've been traipsing around in Machu Picchu.
Yes, I've been in Machu Picchu.
I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, it was a great trip.
I
heard you were away too.
I was away.
When the mouse is away, the cat's going to play.
Actually, I was whisked away by my two sons.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about why parents hate their children. And so what a horrible topic, isn't it? And so I'm all about the truth. We're all about the truth. And the truth is that we have a lot of ambivalent feelings. And so one of the things that we grapple with is love and hate. And it's easier just to split it and say, I hate this and I love this. But the truth is that when we're in as intimate a relationship as a parent to child, a lot of feelings come up. So,
well, you know, Dr. Judy, that childhood really is a hostage situation.
Both ways, right? Both ways,
yes.
From parent to child and child to parent, because
yes,
it's rare that a parent will abandon a child, but it does happen, as you know, which is why we have such deep holes in the soul, because there's disintegration of the family. And so I want to talk about the many reasons why parents have hateful feelings toward their children. And I'll start by talking about me as a mother. Okay, so why would I possibly have hateful feelings toward my children? Well, okay, obviously, when you give birth, there's a lot of pain involved. So I can totally vouch for that. And so...
Well, they also did a few things to your body along the way.
Right. So my big joke with my sons is, you gave me stretch marks. I've got to get a class action suit going against you. Okay, so there's just the plain old, they disrupt your life, they disrupt your sleep. You can't even have time for a shower if you're really parenting.
Well, it does give the phrase spontaneity a whole new definition and meaning.
Totally. Okay, and then those are the normal feelings. So if you're a parent and if you find that you have hateful feelings toward your children, it doesn't mean that you're a bad mother. It doesn't mean that you're a bad father. It just means that you're human. And as human beings, we all have a degree of selfishness. And so we don't really want to give up a part of ourselves. And so when we take on a new human being, our child, whether we adopt the child or primary caregiver or give birth to that child, biological parents, it doesn't matter, because it's a huge commitment. And the truth is that people who have children don't even really exactly know what they're signing up for until that child arrives. And then you look at the child and think, what am I going to do with him or her? And so, how's my life going to be now? I know a lot of people who are currently waiting on giving birth. And so they're asking me all kinds of questions like, how much does life change? And I'm telling them, you better get a lot of sleep now.
How much does life not change?
Right. And so those are just the normal, natural feelings that all parents have for their children. And let's go a little bit further into this. Children cost a lot of money. So if you're a good enough parent, then you're going to have to make some sacrifices, financial sacrifices, meaning that child eventually, hopefully, will go to college. And even before they get to college, they're going to cost you lots and lots of money. I think there was a statistics.
It's like $250,000 or something
like that.
Yeah, between 0 to age 17, 18. I have one. I met a client, and a parent was, lamenting about the fact that his son played hockey and he was a goalie. And of any position from a hockey perspective, the goalie is the most expensive because you got the mask and the gloves and, all the padding and the whole 9 yards. But then he goes, and before that, I have a closet full of stuff that my kid doesn't like. I got basketballs and baseballs and bowling balls and tennis balls and badminton balls and, golf balls and all this stuff. And he just was really pissed that, he has this closet full of stuff his kid didn't want. And I says, well, our goal as a parent is simply to expose our children to stuff. Right. And obviously they're not going to like it all, but they're not going to know unless they try it.
But imagine the resentful feelings of that parent who just spent a gob of money on the kid. I do this with my grandson. I spend money on toys, and then they just sit there. And then I find out that he already got that toy or something like it from somebody else. So yeah, there's all of that. So those are the normal, natural feelings. And especially if you're doing it right, especially if you are going with the schedule of the child and not letting him or her cry it out, that means that you put the baby first. And if you didn't have good enough parenting yourself, and particularly for those of you who've been listening to the show, we talk a lot about narcissistic parents.
We're gonna be touching about narcissistic
definitely
parents.
are.
Absolutely.
Okay?
So stay tuned.
Yeah, and this is a call-in show, and particularly today, I really want you guys to call in, because I know that there are parents out there, people out there who have a normal, hateful feelings about their children. And then we'll get into...
I've got a little definition here if you want to read it.
Please, go ahead.
So from one article here, the reason why mothers secretly hate their daughters, yet secretly many mothers are jealous of their daughter's beauty and confidence, envy her youth, and more than anything, they can tell their daughter is more mentally mature, nurturing, affectionate, kind, friendly, and even more motherly than they are. This is because they don't envy the material things that their daughter possesses. They envy what they can never have, her genuine spirit.
Well, that goes into when the lens gets cracked. I mean, really, really cracked. Some of it is just normal, natural feelings. You have a daughter and she's now blossoming and she's beautiful and you're aging. And so you can't help but to have these feelings that trigger off your own negative core beliefs, which we talk about quite a bit.
Yes, we do.
So for example, if a woman has a negative core belief that she's ugly, okay, that would be a real trigger for her. So
well, I think on top of that, if it's her daughter, she obviously looks a little bit or maybe a lot like her.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I used to look like that and I used to be that way, but now I'm obviously older and I don't.
Right. So this is genuinely going to bring up some very, very harsh
absolutely.
negative feelings. And these are normal feelings. But now let's go a little bit more on the cracked lens of perception side, the pathological end, where, okay, let's start with, let's say, a woman didn't want to have that baby. Okay, let's say that woman got pregnant from her boyfriend, and she doesn't really love the boyfriend, and she wants to separate from the boyfriend. Let's say he's not even involved in the birth process and not contributing any funds. So can you imagine how that baby would represent feelings of resentment? Okay, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
So then there's a process called the projection process. So unfortunately, if a mother doesn't resolve her feelings about the situation before the child is born or very quickly thereafter, what she's going to do is she's going to hold her resentment. She's going to project her resentment onto the child. And some of this is going to be very unconscious. And especially if the child looks like the father.
And she doesn't think too highly of dad.
And she doesn't think too highly of dad. Can you imagine what those feelings are going to generate for her? Or let's say she's in love with the man and the man now disappears and she has, let's layer it even further. Let's say she has a love addiction for the man and she's completely madly in love with the guy and now he's left her and she has this memory of him and she's supposed to forget the guy and move on with her life. But every time she looks at her son, or daughter, she's going to think to herself, wow, she or he has his eyes, or look at the way he moves. And this is going to stir up a lot of feelings. So you can see how the projection process can be at work depending on the circumstances of the pregnancy, the nurturing or non-nurturing of the father. Let's take it even a level further. Let's say that the woman got raped. Okay, happens.
Yes, it
and
does.
she chose not to have an abortion. And let's layer it even more. Let's say she's young, and so now because of her belief system or because her commitment is to give birth to the child, she now cannot go to high school, or she has to stay
college.
She can't go to college. Let's say her family is not of support to her. Let's say that the guy has now disappeared. So can you see how giving birth to this child would be a big, big wound to her, a source of resentment to her, not to discount the joy. Okay, so when we describe the hateful feelings, this is not discounting the joy. But remember, I started the show talking about the feelings of ambivalence. We have feelings of ambivalence.
And remember, the absolute opposite of love is not hate. It's ambivalence.
Indifference.
Indifference.
Right.
Well, ambivalence, indifference. Yeah.
Indifference is where you just don't even care anymore.
There's nothing to bounce off of.
There's nothing to bounce off of. So you're done. So let's just take it another turn. We're going to twist and turn a little bit and see how this plays out. So let's take the father's end of it. So let's say a father gets a woman, his wife, pregnant, and he was going to leave the relationship anyway, and whoops, she's pregnant, and now he's committed, and he's in a hostage situation, even more so. And he feels really bad about leaving her because she's about to have a baby, but the truth is he doesn't really want to be in the marriage. And so when that baby is born, he finds it really, really, really hard to give what I call the trickle down, which is the nurture the
nurturer.
Correct. He can't nurture the nurturer because he secretly, maybe not so secretly, wants to leave the nurturer.
Yeah, leave mom.
He doesn't want to be there. So this baby now represents a noose around his neck. Okay, so do you see how we can twist and turn this thing? And there are all kinds of life circumstances. And depending on life circumstances, that baby can land in a family where that baby can go from one end of the spectrum of really, really, really welcome to really, really, really resented. So I'm reminding you, this is a call-in show. I love call-ins.
Yep, it's a call-in
I
show.
hope
And
I hear
again,
from
get
you.
on the couch with Dr. Judy, and I'll jump on board maybe. The number is area code 323-843-2826. Or you can actually write us at info@drjudywtf.com if you have a question, query, or comment. I've got actually 5 things. One you've already mentioned of why parents will hate their children. And you've mentioned one of them, which is resentment. But the first one they've listed here is envy and jealousy.
Okay.
Children seem to have more these days. Parents could remember their own youth and childhood and figure they didn't have the same money, belongings, attention, schooling, and freedom.
Okay.
And so it's like, you have way more than I ever did when I was your age and, and back in the olden days. And so obviously there could be some envy and some jealousy there. It's just the fact that, mom and dad are stuck at home and the kid can go and gallivant all over the place.
Right. So there's this sense of freedom on the part of the children, and the parents are slaving away, trying to work, and then even worse, providing all these goodies for children that are not appreciating, which gets to the point of parents can have hateful feelings toward their children when they don't feel appreciated. We talk a lot on the show about parents who pump a lot of love into their children, and so there's a kind of an expectation of, if we're going to put a lot into our children, we want to get that back. However, one of the wounds that we mention on our show, wounds of childhood, let me just go over that for a moment, okay? So how are we wounded? Well, first we need basics in order to form a healthy human psyche. We need skin contact, eye contact, breastfeeding, consistency. I'm taking this completely from John Bowlby, Dr. John Bowlby's attachment
theory.
And so if we don't get those goodies, then unfortunately we don't have a lot of goodies to give. Okay, so if our children are not appreciating us, okay, one of the wounds also of, so now I'm going to go into the wounds of the childhood. So if we get these emotional supplies, then lucky us, we have them. If we're wounded, meaning if we're physically abused, sexually abused, emotionally abused, neglected, that is, if we're smothered, then we're going to get bruised, and our potential to be our manifested higher self, our whole complete self as much as we can be, gets shadowed over, and then it cracks our lens of perception, it cracks our potential, and we cannot blossom in the way that we would have had we gotten all those goodies. So now if parents are themselves not receiving all those goodies themselves, then it's very, very hard for them to share them. Okay, so that's number one. And we'll get deeper into that because that's the whole spectrum of narcissism there. Okay, and then furthermore, if that parent is smothering or spoiling that child, they're really creating a system of non-earnership for that child. Okay?
They have to earn it.
Kids have to earn it, okay? Parents have to set up some sort of an earnership system whereby along the pathway of development, the child has to try and say thank you. The child has to learn to earn their toys in a sense of behaving. Maybe that's one way of earning, earn privileges and so on. But today, more and more so, I'm seeing parents, especially when they have a lot to give and they don't have a lot of time to give, there's a trending toward giving with objects.
Material
money,
things.
Material things, okay? So when children are given to without earning their way, they don't appreciate. And so parents don't understand how come they're not gracious? How come they're not appreciative of us? I have one woman in my practice who spoiled her child so badly that she created a narcissistic monster. And now she's getting the wrath of her narcissistic, monstrous daughter, and she's beginning to hate her daughter. really, really hate her daughter because the daughter is attacking her so badly that she is really decompensating is what's happening. And so you can see that if you set up a system whereby there's no ownership there, you're setting up a system of non-appreciation. And then at the end of that pathway, you get somebody who you end up hating because they can't even go so far as to say, thank you, or remember your birthday, or remember to help you clean the table or do the dishes. So we have to be really, really careful as parents what we are causing. And that's where the be the cause the entire philosophy of be the cause is that we have to be more causal and we have to be more cognizant of what kind of systems we set up for our children.
Well, just to digress, Dr. Judy has written a book. It came out last year. It's entitled Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And there's one classic example. And you can pull it on Amazon. It's on Kindle and, of course, in paperback.
So we're going to go now into the territory of narcissism, an often popular subject. And so when parents themselves don't receive the emotional goodies, if they themselves are not cared for, breastfed, if they don't have consistency from their family of origin, what happens is it sets up within them an inability to be givers. And so when the baby shows up, it actually calls upon them, the baby calls upon them to be givers, but they can't do it because they haven't been given to.
They have nothing to give.
They don't. And so any kind of a cry, any kind of a demand upon them is regarded as an imposition and an inconvenience. And so what we are trending toward today is, unfortunately, the disintegration of the family. And the more the family disintegrates, the less babies are getting in terms of this unconditional love and attention and child-centered parenting. And so as a result of that, it's very, very difficult for the next generation to be great parents if they didn't receive great parenting.
Well, there's a little thing here if you want me to elaborate on the narcissistic. I've got an article here, Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. The narcissistic mother is psychologically fused with her daughter. Her coldness and lack of empathy affect her child from the beginning. These mothers experience their daughters not as unique individuals, but as an extension of themselves.
Right. And so that means that if that daughter is not behaving accordingly, I just had somebody...
There's hell to pay.
I'm sure she's listening right now with respect to confidentiality. There was an example recently of a patient who was telling me that her mother didn't like her. She actually told her that she didn't like her during the first month of her infancy. Can you imagine that? I didn't like you during the first month of infancy. So naturally, children will try to intuit their parents. And if the parent is putting the child on the parent's schedule and not respecting the child's schedule, if the parent is allowing the child to cry it out, very soon the child will learn to detach and hold in and close their feelings down and quote, comply with the mother's wishes and eventually stop making noise. And that is not a good thing. However, from a narcissistic mother's point of view, she thinks it's a great thing. Oh, you finally behaved. And then I started loving you. When you finally complied and finally behaved. But by then, there's a whole bunch of psychological damage to that child because now the child is having a reaction to the disconnect.
Well, it says here, narcissistic mothers sabotage their daughter's efforts to become separate, productive individuals. They're envious of their daughter on every level and obviously moves into adolescence. See if this is, I'll dive into this and you can say it doesn't make sense, but the hypnotic hold a narcissistic mother has on her daughter can be so strong and pathological that the child doesn't know where she is thinking or feeling. The narcissistic mother takes full credit for her daughter's achievements. At the same time, she is constantly criticizing and demeaning the child and using, interactive and having interactive and creative ideas. In other words, basically then the child is labeled and stripped of any meaningful role in the family.
Well, it's almost like that mother is turning her daughter into a little dolly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Stepford of sorts.
Right. So if the daughter, again, complies with the mother's needs, then the daughter will be loved. So it's very, very conditional. And what do we need in infancy? Obviously, we need unconditional love, not conditional love. As we develop the conditions of respect and doing your homework and washing dishes and earning your way, grow. But at the beginning of life, for the first at least year 2, 3 of life, we need a lot of unconditional love.
And then if there's 2 children, this article talks about the fact that typically mom will pick the perfect child and the other child is the loser child. And then they try and pit the 2 against each other, and the perfect child can do no wrong and is wonderful, and the losing child is just kind of tossed by the wayside.
And so this goes back into the dynamics of the parents. So the parent may identify with one child over the other, and then the other one becomes the scapegoat, okay? Because the other one reminds that parent of an aspect of themselves that they don't like, or maybe the child reminds them of one of their parents, or child is triggering off wounds between the husband, the partner, and herself. So now the child becomes, again, this point of projection. And so an unhealthy parent will split the children. So one is the angel and one is the devil, and the angel is the one that is compliant and feeds the narcissism of the parent.
Can't do no wrong, walks on water,
right?
Perfect.
And the other one is challenging the parent's false self, which the parent doesn't want the truth light shined on.
No way.
And so he doesn't want that child to expose their flaws and frailties, and wants the child to behave in a certain way.
It's too much of a narcissistic injury.
Yeah, of course. So that child will be ostracized, and that's going to be the devil child, and then the angel child, and then, of course, that'll create a lot of sibling rivalry.
Huge.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So we can now begin to look at the system of how these love-hate relationships develop, why they develop, based on injuries of the parent, based on circumstances of the birth. And there are just a lot of things that factor into why parents hate their children, beginning with the multi-generational idea that their parents didn't exactly fall in love with them either, so that you could see that this is a hand-me-down process. It goes from one generation to the next, and until someone comes in and intervenes with the system and heals the disconnects, this just goes on and on from one generation to the next.
And they come by it and learn it honestly. Narcissists don't like the fact they are empty, needy for approval, pathologically envious, and have horrible thoughts about themselves and other people. And a lot of times they even lie, and they believe their own stuff after a while. They detest their own feelings and vulnerability, deep shame, and unworthiness. They really are one of the most insecure people around.
And so when you have a child, all of these feelings are going to be challenged, no question about it. And especially when your son or daughter gets into the adolescent years, they're going to start saying no big time. There are 2 periods of childhood where no becomes prominent, and that's in the terrible 2s, where they're starting to assert themselves, and then later on when they're trying to separate and individuate. And the last thing a narcissistically wounded parent wants is to allow their child to separate and individuate, because then they're no longer their little dolly, they're no longer their little mirror, their little puppet.
Extension of themselves.
Right, and so that's when they become very hateful, because the child isn't majoring in the subject that they want them to major in, is not going to medical school, becoming a lawyer. So how dare you go against what my dream was? And that's literally it. the child is in service of meeting their narcissistic wishes and needs. And when that doesn't take place, wow, a lot of rage.
The mass quantities, because it's all about them.
That's right.
Yes,
Right.
and if it's not about them, then it's not.
Then it's not. Right. Right.
You're tuned in to Dr. Judy WTF. Thanks so much for watching and listening, which is Dr. Judy What the Freud with Dr. Judy Rosenberg. And thanks for watching us on Facebook or iTunes or even YouTube. We have a whole plethora of shows there on YouTube. Another reason why children don't like their parents is distrust. When parents suddenly find themselves caring for teens, they distrust them if they themselves lack the wherewithal to cope. Will the kids prove too much? Will they let them down? Will they be troublesome? Will they be prevented from having the life of their own?
Well,
again, we're back to the freedom, I think.
We're
is the
back
issue.
to the freedom,
Yeah.
right. And one of the first developmental stages that we have to pass is trust versus mistrust.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we don't have consistency, if we don't have parents that give us the very basics, then we don't get to pass that test. And if we don't pass that test, then we're going to live in paranoid city, and we're going to project that onto our children. So that's how essential it is to heal our own childhood wounds before we become parents. It's just amazing to me. We learn math, we learn physics, we learn geography, we learn how to spell, but how come there are no courses in school on how to prepare a child for good mental health, how to prepare a child for great communication skills, how to prepare a child to be a good partner and a parent? It just doesn't exist really in our curriculum. So I want to, first of all, I want to give a shout out to all of our fans. In particular, there are a lot of people who have been writing in, and
We've got a lot of emails lately.
beautiful emails and cards and wonderful gifts, which
And
we'll
a song.
elaborate
We've got a song
on.
we're going to play in a couple minutes here.
And I really wanted to mention that. And first, I wanted to put it in context. Okay, so really what we're talking about is when we have a hole in our soul, then we don't have the wherewithal to share the light and be givers. And so that when parents don't themselves get all of those narcissistic supplies, it's very, very hard for them to be great parents, because to be a great parent, you have to be a sharer and
A giver.
a sharer and a giver. And so one of our fans,
Andre.
and I hope
He's in British Columbia. He's in Canada.
Oh, he is? Okay. Well, I'm Canadian, Andre,
There you
so
go.
Montreal, Canada. Okay. So I just really want to acknowledge you and thank you so much for sharing this beautiful piece of music. A lot of times, well, pretty much all the time, we shrink a tune with words. But I do want to play a segment of this music, because what Andre has done is he's shared with us in a few minutes, his soul inner pain, and I describe it as that hole in the soul.
Well, it's called a father's lament.
A father's lament.
So we-
right, the pain of his separation and abandonment from his children.
So here's a little bit of piece of that. Father's
Yes.
lament.
Andre Lefebvre. Thank you, Andre.
It builds a little bit.
Yeah, I just love it because it's just so down to the soul level, and there's this feeling of vulnerability to the music.
Absolutely.
And so just listening to that, you can hear some of the yearning and some of the love, the feelings. And he shared with me a little bit about his
daughter.
His daughter and how he misses her. He was dropping her off, and he went home and he was crying so deeply, and this is what came out of him. So I just wanted you to all hear this. So thank you, Andre. We're really in appreciation. I know there's more, and it has nuances where it goes from this vulnerability into a lament. And I wish our show were longer. I just wanted to play a piece of this music for you. So this is really all about the hole in the soul. And some of us have little holes. Some of us have medium-sized holes. Some of us have larger holes. And the extent to which we resent our children in a big way, not just the usual, oh my God, I couldn't sleep last night. Oh my God, I just had to spend a fortune on college education. But the really deep hatred and projection process is a symptom of the parent not having the unconditional love, him or herself, and not reaching a stage of trust within their own psyche where they can trust that child's individuation and separation is not going to hurt them. So this is very deep, it's very layered, and you can see that it's very multi-determined and very multi-generationally determined as well.
It really does become more multi-generational, doesn't it?
Right.
And one other issue here that is mentioned that you've touched on is dissatisfaction. Sometimes children can negate everything the parents hold to be true, everything they've based their lives on. When personal tenets are neglected, people can feel their whole life means nothing. Mm-hmm. After all, such dissatisfaction moves in. You're working your buns off for the kid, and nothing you do they can be happy for.
Right.
They want more and more and more.
Right. And then there are those huge disappointments where a parent watches their son or daughter turn to drugs, which is a true sign of the hole in the soul. Mm-hmm. And so when you think that you've done everything, and I think most parents genuinely feel that they're doing the best that they can do. And again, when we talk about the causal system, we're not talking about it's all your fault. It's just that we are the cause, meaning that our parents were the cause of us. And until we clean up and until we make amends, so to speak, and clean up our own hole in the soul and rise to the occasion of being the best parents we can be, we are going to pass these patterns along. And so a lot of my work and the work of the Psychological Healing Center is to look at the wounds of childhood and see how they encode into the fiber of our being using the mind map system, which I talk a lot about. And once this encodes into the fiber of our being, then we go through a process which I labeled the WTF, the what the Freud, which is chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And so this is a recycle system. When our wounds are triggered by our children, by our spouses, by our employees, by the world, what happens is that our negative core beliefs get activated. And when our negative core beliefs get activated, we will literally go into this spin cycle of chaos, defenses, which don't work for long because most of them are unhealthy, and then we break down. And so if we have a fragile core, we have children or many children, they're going to keep challenging us. And as they grow older and they separate and individuate and become their own person, they may not be the people that we have imagined for ourselves
or expected them to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's, yes, as I've said before, raising parents is really hard work.
Good point.
And it's not easy. So,
right.
And another one is personal discovery and shock. You kind of alluded to this one. It can be a shock to find out who you thought you have as children. They make angry statements, I hate you, or happy statements, I love you, about stuff parents barely understand or approve of. Some parents believe their children because they think they've brought them up to tell the truth. So this must be the truth about themselves. they are so cruel. But they don't understand that they've brought their kids up in the wrong way. And therefore they're, not getting what they expected because it just wasn't right.
And parents also forget that children go through a whole slew of feelings. So just because they say, I hate you one moment doesn't mean that they don't love you. And just because they say, I love you, it doesn't mean that they're not going to have feelings of hate toward you too. So, when you have a child, you kind of have to welcome all of these ambivalent feelings, and you have to hold them in a certain context, and also allow for your child to self-express, because if they don't have a place to self-express, they're going to repress. And so what we repress turns into deep, dark holes of depression. And so all this suppression turns to depression. And so
And depression is simply anger turned inward.
Right, because if they can't say to you, Dad, I really hate you, and Mom, I really hate you, and you can't sit down with them and say, what's going on? And if you right away defend and say, shut up, how dare you talk to me like that? Then what's going to happen is the kid is going to choke on their own feelings, and they're going to have to take a swallow on it and repress it and carry those angry feelings and turn them inwards, because that's the only thing that they can do. Or the other thing they can do, which is also another common defense mechanism, is project their anger onto somebody else, so that their friend might get it, or a teacher might get it, or their,
boyfriend, girlfriend,
kick the dog syndrome, or project it outwards. So even though it might not be a pretty thing, it's a healthy thing for people to express their true feelings toward each other. So with that said, I just can't overemphasize how poisonous it is. Thank you. To suppress your feelings, because it really does turn gangrene on you, and then it ends up imploding or exploding. So if you're a parent and you're going through frustration and feeling hateful toward your child, then obviously you don't want to be telling your 3-year-old that you hate the kid. But you do have to be telling somebody. So maybe you can be talking to a therapist, or talking to your significant other, or just telling a friend and sharing stories, because it's really important to vent this.
Absolutely,
and not project it on the child.
As we say here in the show, do not implode or explode, but unload. And we'd hopefully that you can call us and unload on Dr. Judy's couch. But, get some therapy. It's not the worst thing in the world, and as one person put it, it's the best investment you can ever make in yourself.
And for those of you who do not live in the LA area, myself and my interns and psych assistants who are trained in the mind map system, we do a lot of teletherapy. We do Skype therapy. We do therapy with people all over the world. And we also have people who work on a sliding scale fee basis. So please do not let finances stop you. We really, really try not to turn anybody down. And so if you feel that you have some cleaning up to do, cleaning up of wounds, then please do contact me. And I'd be really happy to set you up with
if you have an iPhone, you can go to Psychological Healing Center on your iPhone and get plugged right in.
Right.
And Dr. Judy's not real one with having therapy last forever. I mean, 10 sessions or so makes an absolute gigantic difference and improvement in things. It really does. Because if you get her book, what's a fun thing about it, in there every chapter, she's got a section entitled Think Like a Shrink. Right. And the goal here is for you to really think like a shrink on your own, so you can, realize that you can figure this out on your own. And maybe every once in a while you might need a little checkup from the neck up, but this is not a long-term involved situation. It really isn't. Right.
And I do recommend that if you're thinking about entering into therapy, into the Be the Cause Mind Map system, that you get a copy of the book. It's available on Kindle. It's available on Amazon or through the website drjudywtf.com.
Sure is.
And just read it and allow the system to filter into your brain and emotions. And then if you feel that this is for you, by all means, contact and we will start you on the journey. And that is pretty much our show of why parents hate their children
And if you have any questions, comments, or queries, you can write us again at info@drjudywtf.com. We read everything comes in, and we're getting more emails and likes on YouTube. And, of course, we're on iTunes and iHeartRadio. So we're going to shrink a song here. We're going to play one version, and I'm going to talk about another. It's something we've all heard our entire life. It was a lullaby, and it's entitled Rock-a-Bye Baby.
Yeah.
Dr. Judy thought this would be a little apropos. Rock-a-bye baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, cradle and all.
Well, I love that we're doing this particular song because it really, really epitomizes feelings parents have toward their children. And so here's obviously a mother who is rocking her baby, and one interpretation is that the wind is blowing, meaning that we can't control everything, can we? So the wind is just kind of like uncontrollable, and then eventually boughs break, things will fall, the baby will get sick, or the baby will throw up, or something will happen, and down will come baby, cradle and all. And it's really, really interesting that the next stanza isn't about how regretful the mother is, but it's kind of like the mother's ambivalent feelings of, this is such a pain. Okay, so just let the cradle fall already.
Well, it used to say in my daughter's bib back in the day, spit happens.
Yes.
Rock-a-bye baby, gently you swing. Over the cradle, mother will sing. Sweet is the lullaby over your nest. The tendency sings my baby to rest.
So
that tenderly sings my baby to rest.
So here's the loving feelings. Do you see the ambivalence? We're going from a falling cradle to he's gently swinging now, and mother's singing over the cradle, and there's a sweet lullaby. So here's mom being very loving and nurturing and, loving up the baby.
From the high rooftops down to the sea, no one's as dear as baby to me. Wee little hands, eyes shiny and bright, now sound asleep until morning light.
So more of the beauty and the idealization, how sweet the little wee hands and shiny eyes, and, mommy's in love here.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, rock-a-bye baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, cradle and all.
And there is the whole slew of feelings, from sweet, loving feelings and wee little hands all the way to the cradle will fall. And that's just the whole range of feelings that we have.
And I think that's beautiful. And so we're going to close out our song with a little unique version. I think you'll enjoy it, of Rock-a-bye Baby. I'm Walt Lusk, your host of Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg, founder of Psychological Healing Center and world-renowned author of Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And if you have any questions or challenges, write us, info@drjudywtf.com. And next week we're going to have a special guest. So thanks so much for watching and listening. Until next time, God bless everyone.